A large majority of sellers that work with us generally sell on Amazon, eBay, Shopify, Walmart. Those are pretty much the big four we typically see most of our sellers come from. But you also might be one of those people that don't just sell on those platforms. You sell on Mercari, you sell on a place like Stadium Goods, you sell on Etsy. Maybe you sell on, there's all sorts of others like Alias, there's Goat is another one. I mean, there's a lot of these that we've seen that sellers tend to sell on, all sorts of different marketplaces. And so a question I get a lot is, well, how do you handle that for tax purposes? Well, they're handled very similar to how Amazon and eBay are, where you're basically getting reports from Amazon, reports from eBay, and getting all the information. The difference is that generally Amazon is better than all of these other platforms as far as from a reporting perspective. They give us all the information. Same thing with Shopify. They give us lots of information that we need for tax purposes. It makes it extremely easier for us to handle taxes. The other platforms like eBay, Mercari, Stadium Goods, Etsy, Alias, Goat, all of these other places we're talking about here, BigCommerce, all these other places we have, the reporting generally isn't as good as we tend to see with Amazon, eBay, and Shopify. Those are and even Walmart's not that amazing, but they're definitely better than some of these other ones. So generally what will happen is that when you're working with us for tax purposes, is we're going to ask you for reports from each of these different platforms. And just like you'll get from Amazon and eBay and some of these other platforms, you generally will get a 1099-K from each of these platforms. The 1099-K itself is effectively a list of all the sales that have occurred, minus any discounts you have given. Potentially will be sales tax added onto that if sales tax was collected on your behalf and then remitted to the states on your behalf. That generally will also be on a 1099-K as well. And so you'll usually get those 1099-Ks directly from each of these platforms. But then there's also actual reporting that we will need as part of the tax process from each of these specific different platforms. And we'll give you instructions on how to download those as you let us know what platforms you have. And just keep in mind when we're doing taxes, we will just need those reports. So that's basically about it. Very, very simple. We can handle pretty much any platform you have because pretty much every platform will have the reporting that you need for tax purposes, and we'll just ask for it. And once we have those reports, you typically will also need to provide some sort of cost of goods sold for each of these different platforms. Obviously, with Amazon, a lot of people are using Sellerboard or Inventory Lab for those sorts of selling platforms, or they may have some sort of other tool to track their cost of goods sold. Maybe they have an Excel spreadsheet, that sort of thing. Shopify, generally you'll have it, again, either in a spreadsheet or it's tracked directly in Shopify. For some of these other platforms, it's a little more dicey because there's no software tool that actually tracks this stuff. So in those cases, generally you will need some sort of spreadsheet to show how much each individual item you sold was actually bought for, so that we can appropriately make sure they're correct. That's if you want to use the accrual method of accounting, which if you're unfamiliar with cash versus accrual method of accounting, I strongly recommend watching the video we have on cash versus accrual for cost of goods sold, which can be located on a link on this page as well. But if you use the accrual method, we do need to know how much each individual item was that you sold and how much you originally paid for it. If you don't have that information, you can't recompile it in some fashion. The only thing we can do is utilize cash method of accounting, which means we take everything you purchased and then we just write it off whenever you purchased it versus aligning it with the cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold when you actually sold the items. So let's keep that in mind that we will need that sort of information when you're handling these other platforms. It's a little bit different than Amazon and Shopify because we generally will already have the information based on whatever tools you're likely already using. All right, so that's about it. If you have any further questions on any of this, feel free to let us know. Thanks, appreciate it.